Well, thank you, Paul. Thank you for that gracious welcome. And I'm so excited to be a part of this phenomenal community event, Teams Fest. And really, in the next hour, I really want to walk everybody through a very practical guide on how you can be a rockstar Microsoft Teams presenter. For those I have not met, my name is Dux Raymond Sy. I serve as the Chief Brand Officer of AvePoint, a Microsoft Regional Director and MVP, and just been privileged to be working in this industry in the last 18 to 19 years. So to get us started, I want to get a pulse of everybody's current state of virtual presentation. So here's what I want you to do. So friends, open up another browser, and I want you to answer this question. What's your biggest challenge with virtual presentations? You go to this website, slido.com, and put this code. So let me bring up that website for everybody. So for friends that just joined, again, open up a browser, go to this website, slido.com, and put in the code G479, okay? And I want to get a pulse of everybody in this session on what's your biggest challenge with virtual presentations. All right, getting contact with attendees, getting responses, all right? I only have two hands, difficulties, okay, great. Keeping engaged, bringing in third-party attendees. So talking about external attendees potentially, awesome. What else? In one word, what's your biggest challenge with virtual presentations? Open up a browser, go to slido.com, G479 is the code. Interactivity, all right. Let's see, managing PowerPoint and talking at the same time. Certainly, virtual presentations a little different that way because now you're having multiple things going on, multiple balls in the air. Interactivity, keeping people engaged, making it fun. All right, so again, folks that just joined, go to this website, slido.com, put in the code G479, and answer this question. In one word, what's your biggest challenge with virtual presentations? Interactivity. So it looks like interactivity is top of mind for a lot of us, and the good news is we'll definitely talk about it during this session. So I'll keep this up there, keep putting stuff in if you have more things that you want to learn or some things that are your challenge about. So we'll go back to this once we carry on. So one of the key things that I make sure when we start a session, be it a meeting or presentation, is just to remind everybody that your setup is good. So again, I'm sure all of you have used Microsoft Teams already. So just to make sure, set your mics on mute as we're recording this. And if you have questions later, certainly we're happy to have you come on and ask your question, and also come on video as well. And what are we going to tackle today? So today we're going to tackle three very important topics around virtual presentation. First, we're going to talk about why effective virtual presentation skill is essential. And we're going to talk about the roles of a presenter. So when you're in front of a camera, be it online or standing on the stage, we put on different hats. So we're going to talk about that. And then I'm going to walk you through 4 practical steps to be a rock star virtual presenter. You know, I started my career, for those that may not know, as a assembler programmer. To some of you, you don't know what assembler is because you weren't born yet. But back in the day, when I finished my education in electrical engineering, I programmed assembler. I programmed on Motorola chips. And boy, I got to tell you, I hated meetings. I hated presentations. I just wanted to work with computers. I remember that one day where my boss told me, hey, you got to come with me to a customer and present this solution. 10 minutes in the presentation, the customer told us to stop, ended the meeting, and doesn't want anything to do with us. And it has to do with my poor, very poor presentation skill. Now, I made it a mission in my life, this was in the early 90s, that I want to improve myself, I want to get better at this, and through the years, I've learned a lot of stuff, which definitely I'll share with you today. The first thing I learned is I had to figure out, why is this important? Why is public speaking and being able to present well critical in whatever we do? Well, there are 3 reasons. The first reason is the goal of presentation or public speaking is to persuade. And when we persuade, no matter what presentations you're in, be it technical, non-technical, all we're doing is we're trying to sell change. We want people to change. We want people to do better, or we want to convince them that our product can help them in their journey or in their transformation. Persuasion also elicits intrigue and curiosity, because if you don't do that, 2 minutes in, people would just shut off. To persuade means you're pitching so that the audience would want to know more. So that's the first reason why it's important. The second reason why presentation and public speaking is essential is you want to motivate people. And when we think about motivation, you want to make sure that your audience can relate to you and can trust you. You want to be authentic and credible. I've been there and done that. It's not like I'm just telling you this academically with no experience. And you want to encourage people to start, stop, and change what they're doing, improve themselves. And change is the hardest thing. We all know this. We all talk about change management, but this is no different. So you want to motivate people to get going. You want to arouse passion as well as you motivate people. The last reason why effective presentation is essential is you want to inform, you want to share your knowledge, enhance everybody's understanding, and really make them remember what you talked about. So once the presentation is done, they're walking away with a lot of important things that's beneficial to them. So now that the 3 reasons why presentations are essential, the other key factor to any presentation is the ability for us to put on multiple hats as a presenter. You see, when we come on the screen or when we start a meeting or in fact step on a stage, we don't just go there because we know our technical stuff. I mean, that's important, but frankly, there are 4 other things that's critical. Number 1 is the role of a presenter is to be a learning manager. You want to make sure that you craft the key learning points that your audience needs to learn throughout the session. So for example, in this hour, I want everybody to learn 3 things. Why presentation skills is important, the roles of a presenter, and the 4 steps that you can put together a solid virtual presentation. So that's our job. That's our role as a presenter. The second responsibility we have is we are the subject matter expert. We're the technical resource. We're presenting this because we've been there, we've done that, we've mastered the craft, and we're continuing to improve upon ourselves. The third reason is you're the company representative. And I would say, especially for us in this ecosystem, not only we represent our companies, we represent Microsoft. So what does that mean? We should do things that our mom would be proud of. And then the opposite, we shouldn't do things that our mom will not be proud of, or say things that our mom will not be proud of, right? We got to be a coach. Now, for friends who's attending this session, anybody coach a sports team? If you coach a sports team, put in the chat what sport you coach. I want to get a pulse of folks in sports here or folks that are coaching any type of team. Okay, if you are coaching any type of sports team, be it for adults or kids, let me know in the chat. Okay, Paul coaches soccer or football. Krister, golf. Okay, so when you're a coach, right, what's your main responsibility other than teaching them the sport? So let me ask Krister or Paul, feel free to type in the chat. What do you do to the team? What's your main responsibility? Is your main responsibility to make everybody feel good all the time? Make sure everybody's happy? That's part of it, absolutely. And I would suspect part of your responsibility is, as best you can, teach them to be the best football player or the best golfer out there. And that's our job as well. We want to teach them and motivate them. Sometimes it's hard, but that's our job. We want to motivate and inspire people. Even if it's hard, they can do it. Lastly, our responsibility as a host is, or as a presenter, is being a host. And a host, you need to make people feel welcome. So think about a party you you've been to, obviously in the last 6, 7 months. You've never been to a real party, a big party. But I remember in my last holiday party that I went to, as I knocked on the door opens, the first thing that the host said, "Hey, can I take your coat? How are ya? What drink would you like?" And that's certainly what Paul did earlier when we started the session. "Hey, everybody, welcome. Hope everybody's doing well. Where are you from?" So those are the kinds of roles we play as a presenter. And I'll go back to these 5 points as I walk through the 4 steps. So with that being said, I know a lot of folks have joined us. Out of curiosity, I always love to ask this in a session like that we hold virtually. Where's everybody from? So if you pop in your in the chat where your location is and how the weather is right now in your location, I would love to learn about it. So we've talked about why presentation is essential, the roles of a presenter. Now I want to walk through the 4 key steps in putting together a solid virtual presentation. And I'm so glad we have friends from all over the world, from UK to Sweden. I know in Sweden it's almost fika time. Friends from Maryland and Ireland as well. Thank you. We've got friends from Finland. And I guess in München, it's quite rainy, huh? So thank you for joining. So the first step to be a Rockstar Microsoft Teams presenter is you have to intentionally prepare. Now, what does intentional preparation mean? It doesn't matter if you're putting together a presentation or a meeting, you have to be intentional on how you want to describe the presentation. You want to develop a catchy abstract. And this is the formula I've used, and it's worked for me in the last 17, 18 years. First and foremost, the title of the presentation should be short and relevant. And if you can, especially if it's a technical presentation, add some numerical value. So for example, when I put together a presentation, I would say, hey, how to be a Rockstar presenter with Microsoft Teams. 5 steps to migrate to Office 365. 3 best practices on driving adoption. Now, there's a reason why I do that. Number 1, if it's too long, people will not pay much attention. Number 2, if it's not specific, again, it's too generic. You can't just say best practices for adoption, right? And then lastly, I find that if you have a number, really like it because it has a clear vision of what the takeaways are. Now, be careful though. You don't want to put anything more than 7 because there's a research that's already been published a few years ago that for adult learners, we can only hold, between 7 or plus or minus 2 sets of information in our head. So if your session is 99 ways to be the best Microsoft 365 admin, I guarantee you, people will be too daunted to attend that 1-hour session. The second thing is, if you get people to read the title and they still want to read the description, because as you know, people don't read the description. That's why you got to get them in the title. Your description should be very specific, which includes outcome, the content, and the audience that you're focusing on. So here's an example on how you write the description. So here's an example, right, for the formula for a description. Need to ensure your Office 365 data is protected. That's a business outcome. In this session, you will gain full understanding of what native Office 365 capabilities are available and advanced solutions you can take advantage of to protect your data. This session is intended for those responsible for ensuring your organizational Office 365 data is protected from accidental deletion, malicious attacks, or violating industry regulations. Now, if you think about this, right, this formula not only works for presentations like this, you can take this and put it in your meeting invite for customer meetings as well. In fact, that's what I do when I have customer meetings. In the title or the subject of the meeting is my title, 7 ways to protect your data in Office 365. In the body of my meeting, this is what I put. So being very specific and intentional not only can get people to be curious, it makes them want to attend and makes them want to learn. Because as you know, with virtual presentation, everybody has these online meeting fatigue now. The more attractive, the more curiosity you raise with your audience, the higher likelihood of them attending. Another tactic to intentionally prepare is consider and think about how your audience and attendees learn. You see, as adults, we're not like kids. I have two wonderful children, and boy, when they were younger, they absorb information like sponges. Unfortunately, we as adults, we don't absorb information like they do. You see, our brain is not a tape recorder. What we do is we take incoming information and we need to connect it with existing knowledge. I mean, for a technical analogy, our brain is not an object-oriented database. Our brain is more of like a relational database, right? We learn by processing it, not just receiving it. So, you know what? I want to do a quick exercise and prove to you that our brain connects the dots with existing information. So, okay, here's what I want you to do. I'm going to show you a set of words for about 5 seconds, and as best you can, memorize it. No cheating. Don't write it down or anything. Don't take a screenshot. Just do your best, memorize the words. And then after that, I will hide the words and then show it again and tell me how much you remember. Okay, you ready? Okay, get ready. Here we go. Try and memorize these words. Okay, so now type the word somewhere. You can type in the chat, put it in Notepad, or just write on a piece of paper. Okay, just write as much or type as much as you remember. Those 8 words that I showed you. Okay. All right. I need to play the Jeopardy music here. Okay, so now here's what I want you to do. Honesty system. How many of you remembered 8 words? Put in the chat. If you remember 8 words, said, you know, I did. 7. Who remembered 7? Wow. 6 words. 5. 4, 6. Okay. All right. Okay. There you go. So let me try another one. I'm going to show you another set of words. And this time, let's see how much you remember. Okay. You saw those 8 words. Let's see how much you remembered. Okay. So I'm going to show it back to you and tell me if you remembered 8 words. 7. 6. Wow. Somebody remembered 8. So looks like people remembered more. Why? Because these words are related to each other. I'm sure some of you are even singing in your head, right? My toes, my knees, my shoulder, my head. So point being is people learn by connecting information. So now as you start putting together your content, you don't just randomly copy and paste content from Microsoft Learn or the old TechNet, right? You got to be very intentional. And you got to identify main points and make sure that your content is presented in a structured story. You don't need tons of words. The key is you should be able to connect the dots and tell people what the challenges are, what the current solutions are, and how you can address it. In fact, when I'm putting together a presentation, this is kind of like my framework that I use. Number one is the outline I put together is what's the framework? What is the need? So we talked about the need, right? Remember, the first thing I asked you for those that joined us when we started is what's the biggest challenge? Oh, interactivity, getting people to engage, technical difficulty. So that's the need. What's the solution? So I'm going through the solution with you, right? First, you got to know why we present, what's your role, the 4 steps, and then later we'll do a call to action. So that's kind of my framework, and it works all the time. Because it puts together a structured story. If you're using PowerPoint, the slides, these are the rules I use for myself. No complete sentences, only phrases. Why do you think I don't put complete sentences. In the chat, let me know why having a complete sentence or a paragraph is a bad idea for a presentation slide. And in addition, in my slides, other than using phrases, I make sure there's no more than 9 bullets, right? And this is related to the first point. Very good. Too long, hard to remember, because naturally as human beings, if there's something we can read, we read. We don't pay attention to the speaker. Whereas with this, if it's just phrases or bullets, you won't have context, and your only choice is to listen to the speaker. Exactly, get distracted. And remember, we only have so much storage in our head to remember things. That's why it's only 9 bullets max. Not sub-bullet or main bullet, total 9 bullets. 18-point font as the minimum font size. If you feel like it doesn't fit, and I know you play this game, I'm going to make the font size 11 points so it'll fit. Bad idea. If that happens, that means it shouldn't go on that slide. Lastly, this is the important one. The way I measure my slides, each slide is worth 2 to 3 minutes. And when I say each slide, each content slide, you know, the intro slide, those doesn't count. The divider slides, those doesn't count. Screenshot, those doesn't count. But the content slide to me is worth 2 to 3 minutes, depending on if it's a demo, I have a demo or not. So like today, I don't have a demo, really. Each slide, each content slide is worth 2 minutes. And the reason why I measure it that way is so that if I know my presentation is 60 minutes, then maximum slides I can have is 30 slides. If I know my presentation requires a demo, each slide is worth 3 minutes. So that's 20 slides. And I do that because I want to make sure I pace correctly. I don't want to rush in the end. Oh man, I have 50 more slides. Boom, 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 boom. Not good. Now, of course it's hard, right? But you have to be very intentional about doing these things because there's only so much people can remember. This is a fascinating stats, and you can look this up. For example, if an hour session, you have 30 slides per hour, considering our math that we did, right? Because there's no demo, you know, 60 minutes divided by 2 minutes per slide, 30 slides, and you have 9 points per slide. That means you're trying to convey 270 points per session. Research has found that after 24 hours, people only remember half of the presentation. 48 hours later, people will only remember 25%, a quarter of the presentation. Now, pop quiz. How much do you think people will remember in their long-term memory? How many percent of the presentation will people remember long-term? Take a guess, pop it in the chat. And if I see some numbers, I'll tell you what the answer is. And this is really, really fascinating research. Very good, okay. Actually, it's a little higher than 3 or 5%. It's 11%. So on the average, people only remember 11% of a typical presentation. When I learned about this a while ago, it changed how I put my presentations together. Because for us, we always want to jam so much content and information. But now what I think about is, what 11% do I want people to remember? Because if you have so much content and if you're not intentional about it, the 11% Paul remembers is different. The 11% Rihan remembers is different. But for me as a presenter, there's a consistent set of content and information I want everybody to remember. So that's part of being intentional. Now, hopefully this has been beneficial. You know, would love to hear your feedback. What do you think of the presentation so far? If it's helpful, too fast, too slow, interesting, I would love to hear your feedback. Another part of intentional preparation is you need to address various learning styles, especially in a virtual presentation model. You see, oftentimes in our minds, we think, well, all we need is the video and all we need is great slides and great images. That's great. True, it's important, but that's only one aspect of learning. It's the visual aspect, and it's important. But equally as important is what's called the auditory learning. The auditory learning is where the presenter speaks. And when I say speak and explain, I don't talk about the person reading this slide. The person being intentional, talking about an example or describing the process, because especially for us technologists and we want to share technical content, there's always some process of how to do things. And people learn best through auditory learning when they need to learn about some type of process. For example, how do I migrate to Office 365? Well, first step, you got to start discover your data. Second step, so those type of process-oriented content is best delivered in an auditory format. The third way of learning, which is frankly the most important one based on research, which I agree, and this is something we don't do a lot, is what's called kinesthetic learning. Now, what's kinesthetic learning? Kinesthetic learning is the idea that we engage the audience. This goes back to the didactic model of learning where it's not just one way. Now, certainly in a virtual environment, it's harder. How do you engage? How can you be more interactive? There are a lot of techniques and tools that I'll show you in a second, but a couple of things that hopefully you've seen already. Number one, we got started. I had you input your challenge. You went to a website, you put in your challenge. Time and again, I ask a question and you respond. We can use polling, we can use whiteboard. The key is listen. If you're not listening, listen. This is an important part. You need to drive engagement between 5 to 7 minutes because our attention span, especially these days, no more than 7 minutes. Our mind would drift away. So kinesthetic learning is critical, and I'll show you techniques later on how to drive engagement. So what are some of the tools that I use, especially for presentations like this? Earlier, you saw a tool called Slido. Use another tool called Kahoot for a lot of online games and testing. I use virtual desktop. So if you're not familiar with virtual desktop, I love virtual desktops in Windows 10 because I don't have to get out of PowerPoint. I just flip my desktop so I can go to my demo right away. I don't know about you. I just don't like getting out of PowerPoint and bringing up the browser. I do recorded demos, especially in this environment. So I record a lot of my demos. I still have my live environment, but I record my demos and I talk over my demos. That way I'm minimizing any type of hiccups or failure. Polling and chatting are great tools as well. So that's the first step. In fact, the first step covers the most topics in this session. The second step is as soon as you're ready, you're about to start presenting, you have to have a proactive opening. Now, what do I mean by proactive opening? You have to be intentional again in making sure everything is ready for your virtual presentation. Tech check. So this is my setup at home. I have a desktop. I have a standing desk. Make sure your face is well lit. Lighting is critical. I mean, you can get a ring light. I just got these 2 lights that I found from Amazon that's used for photography. Works well. Camera should be eye level. Now, this is another important point. If camera is too low or too high, there's a subtle nuance on how you're perceived in a virtual environment. So as much as possible, do it at an eye level. Mic should be as close as possible. I use a USB mic. Sometimes you can even get nice wireless mics so you get solid quality audio. And make sure you turn off all your apps on your desktop. And as people come in, welcome everybody. Because for folks that don't know you, they're going to start thinking, is this worth my time? Will I learn something? So as people come in, essentially you put on your host role, you know, they knock on your door. Hey, welcome to the party. Can I take your quote? Where are you from? If you noticed earlier, as we were about to start, I just turned on music. People love music, especially in a virtual environment. Go for it. Engage in the conversation. Essentially exercise your host role. That way you can make people feel more comfortable and they'll feel more open to learning from you and knowing about the topic as you get started. And you want to set the scene. Video, video, video. It's hard enough to drive engagement, so use all the tools you have. Video is very, very important. Dress up as you were meeting people face to face. And certainly it depends on the audience. If this is a very formal presentation, formal meeting, you can suit up. And for more of a community type, for an informal type of session, you can certainly put together a more business casual type of getup. And stage your background. Certainly, we only have so much we can do with our background, but do your best to stage it. Personally, I don't use custom backgrounds. I just like natural background. But in a scenario where you have to use custom background, pick the right custom background for you. Thank you, Renee. And when you get started, your initial pitch matters. What's your opening hook? And it depends on the presentation. There's multiple ways to do your opening hook. You can open by talking about a stat. Did you know that presentation skills is one of the most hardest thing people want to deal with or take care of? Or did you know that this, that, the other? So that's one way. Or another way is to start engaging people right away. What's the biggest challenge you have for virtual presentation? So you got to get people in. That's what we mean by opening hook. Second is you want to establish your expertise. And when I say establish your expertise, make it as quick as possible. Hey, everybody, I'm Dux. I served as Chief Brand Officer, Microsoft MVP. I've been around doing this for 18 years. Stop it. And at that point, make it quick. You just want to establish your expertise and move on. You don't want to tell your life story, right? You don't want to say, oh, I graduated from this school. I'm MCSE, MVP, Run DMC. Because if you keep doing that, people just get bored. Lastly, set realistic expectations. I always start my session and say, hey, look, in this session, you learn 3 things. That's it, right? Anything less than 7, pretty much. So we talked about the second step, right? Which is having a proactive opening. So step 1 is intentional preparation. Step 2 is have a proactive opening. So as soon as you get started with your session, how can you facilitate engagement? How can you be very, very interactive? Well, first and foremost, analogies work. For me, especially in this technical world, I use a lot of analogies, especially if I'm speaking to a non-technical audience. So here's an example. I recall when I was starting in my career in early 90s, late 90s, I started a consulting business. And at that time, we would build web applications. And at that time, Microsoft came out with this technology called ASP.NET, because before that, people were just using, open source technologies like CGI Perl, or I recall Visual Basic. And my company at that time, we would build ASP.NET applications. And there was this one instance where I had to sell to a CFO because he had the budget. So now I can't really talk about the technology and the nuances of why this is great. So what I did is I used an analogy. I said, hey, Mr. Customer, every Thanksgiving, I would visit my aunt in Atlanta because other than a great Thanksgiving meal, the turkey and the fixing and the sides, she would make an awesome chicken parmesan. So that Thursday morning, as she would get started, I would just sit in the kitchen, help her out, and really wait for the chicken parmesan. So we start around 10:30, and then we would prepare the food. And right around 12:30, the chicken parmesan would be ready. I would be the first one to taste it. Now, for some reason, as soon as that chicken parm is ready, my cousin would walk in. Maybe he would smell it, and he would be the second person to taste it. So the question becomes, did my cousin have to wait as long as I did? Obviously not, right? I had to wait, sit there 10:30, help out until I got my first taste, and then my cousin just walked in and tasted it. Well, guess what? That's how ASP.NET works. You see, ASP.NET, when you build these web pages, web applications, the first time it loads, it goes through a compilation process, so it takes a little longer. But after that, the second time the website loads or somebody goes to that website, that thing will go really fast. And that's it. And people love it, right? My pro tip, always use food as an analogy. So that's one way to facilitate engagement and be interactive. I also recall in 2013, one of the worst natural disasters that's been recorded is a super cyclone and super typhoon called Typhoon Haiyan. It hit Southeast Asia pretty bad. And this devastated the Philippines, where I'm originally from. A lot. And what's heartwarming is, despite that, the first rescuers that went there was from the U.S. Pacific Command, the U.S. Navy. An aircraft carrier got to the Philippines really quick. They did a lot of rescue operations, and the technology they used essentially SharePoint on premises on the aircraft carrier, and then the soldiers on their mobile devices, they had access to that SharePoint site, and that's how they coordinated relief efforts, survivors, supplies that they need. And as you may imagine, SharePoint on an aircraft carrier, depending on the internet connection, there are latency and sometimes there's no connectivity. So one of the cool technologies they use is our technology, AvePoint. We have a low bandwidth replicator. So I tell this story because, number one, it's really amazing to see how technologies can be used to support missions like this. But second is it brings more meaning versus I just talk about the function and features of our technology called AvePoint Replicator. You see, storytelling is very, very effective when you present. You describe the pain points, you promote what you've learned, and then showcase best practices. And this is really fascinating. You know, stories can be 22 times more memorable compared to other types of information. I can show you all the fancy technical details of a technology, but if I tell you a story on how the technology has helped, boy, it's much more powerful. You see, storytelling is the emotional transfer of information through the introduction of a character, plot, and conclusion. If you all haven't seen this book, go get it. Miri Rodriguez, she works for Microsoft. She did a lot of storytelling and continues to do so, but a lot of great practical examples here on how you can put stories together. Another way to interact with the audience is make sure you ask questions, provide learning activities, as you've seen we've been doing here, and do demos. Speaking of demos, like I said, I record all my demos. You know, this was a demo I was showing how to provision multiple teams using Power Automate and then using the Graph API. So what I did is I recorded my demo, and as I was showing this, I was just talking around it. And certainly people may have questions, and if they have questions, I have my live environment that I show them as well. So take advantage of recorded demos so you can reuse it time and again. Lastly, around virtual engagement, have a colleague, if you can, especially if there's a lot of people, engage in chat. Pause and ask feedback, and really have audience speak up and share their thoughts and their questions as well. Speaking of questions, friends, if you have questions, feel free to pop it in. I'm more than happy to address it as we move along. So we talked about the 3 steps to put together a solid virtual presentation and be a rockstar presenter in Microsoft Teams. Number 1, intentional preparation. Number 2, proactive opening. Number 3, facilitate engagement. Number 4, you got to end with a motivational closing. You see, formal closure is important. You can't just leave people hanging. And that's why, going back to my first point, when you prepare, you calculate how much slides you need. Because if you end up having more than you need, you're going to hurry in the end and you won't have formal closure. Summarize your presentation and have a call to action. And ask people to fill out session evaluation if it's relevant, especially in a session like this. Also, connect with your audience beyond the presentation. And these days, there's so many ways to connect. Provide resources, have people connect with you on LinkedIn or Twitter or an online community, just like this community here or Microsoft Tech community. So we talked about all the different aspects on being a rockstar virtual presenter, why presentation is important. Number 2, the roles of a presenter. Number 3, the 4 steps that you need to be a solid virtual presenter. I wanna test everyone if you all paid attention. So here's what I want you to do. I'm going to do a game here, and whoever wins has a prize. I'm going to send you an Amazon gift card, okay? So listen up. Here's what I want you to do. Open a browser, and I want you to go to this website because we're going to play a game here, friends. Here you go. So go to this website, kahoot.it, and put in this code. This is the game pin, and we're going to start playing a game. Open a browser and go to this website, put in this code. And once everybody's in, or most everybody's in, we're going to play a game. And whoever wins, I'm going to send you an Amazon gift card. All right, let's do it. So we've got one player. I love these player names and player handles. Super Rabbit. Okay. Now just remember who you are. So later when I give you the prize, if you won, I know who to give it to. Okay. All right. So let's get started here. Okay. So let's get started with our game. Okay. So we got a couple people joining. Okay. Virtual presentation game starts in 3, 2, 1. First question. Why is effective virtual presentation essential? To advance your career, it's a popular thing to do, to persuade, motivate, and inform if you want to pursue sales. Again, if you just joined us, you can still join website at the bottom and game pin at the bottom, okay? All right, why is effective virtual presentation essential? What's your answer? Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see. The answer is to persuade, motivate, and inform. Looks like Super Rabbit is leading. And if you're thinking, how is this person leading? And everybody got that answer. A lot of people got that answer right. Well, most likely Super Rabbit was the first one. Second, true or false? We learn by incorporating new information with existing knowledge. True or false? We learn by incorporating new information with existing knowledge. Okay, so 19 answers. Again, if you just joined us, feel free to jump in. You can be a part of this game by going to the website, entering the pin at the bottom. And the answer is true. Awesome. Everybody got it? Let's see who's leading now. Mountain Jaguar. Awesome. Next, number 3. How much of this presentation will we remember in our long-term memory? 50%, 25%, 40%, 11%. We talked about the importance of putting together solid content, but be mindful of how much stuff you put in there, right? Because we only remember so much. And the answer is 11%. Let's see who's leading the pack. Mountain Jaguar. All right. Number 4. As a presenter, the most important role is being a good what? Host, coach, learning manager, subject matter expert. What's the most important role here? Being a good, we talked about the 5 different roles of a presenter, and the most important one is being a host. Absolutely. And leading the pack is Dandy Rhino. Number 5, what is the most effective way to learn? Visual learning, auditory learning, kinesthetic learning, or none of the above. Okay, let's see who got this. What's the most effective way to learn? It's kinesthetic learning. And kinesthetic learning is engaging and being interactive with your audience. Mountain Jaguar is back. Last question. How often do you need to drive interaction in your presentation? 2 to 4 minutes, 15 to 7 minutes, 5 to 7, 8 to 10. How often do you need to drive interaction? All right. 3, 2, 1. Let's see who got it. The answer is 5 to 7 minutes. And the winner is 3rd place, Quick Glider. 2nd place, we have Super Rabbit. And then the winner of this game, Mountain Jaguar. Awesome. If you're Mountain Jaguar, can you put in the chat and tell me who you are, and I'll connect with you later, and make sure you get this Amazon gift card. So hopefully you all kind of get the idea of how I wanted you to remember that 11%. And hopefully you found this session beneficial. Homework for you. Think of an upcoming presentation you have, apply some of the concepts, and I would love to help you. If you want me to review and do a walkthrough with you, you know where to get me. 3 things we covered: why effective virtual presentation skill is important, the different roles, and the 4 steps to be a rockstar virtual presenter. Thank you again, everybody, and Paul, thank you for this wonderful opportunity, and enjoy the rest of Teams Fest, and I look forward to connecting with you.